Texas at Florida, week 6 in the Swamp, Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. Huge game for both of these teams, really, and especially for the Gators. So we're previewing it, we're predicting it. Let's start with the line. The line sits at 6.5, favored towards the Horns. Not really a surprise there, not much of a shock. Now, if you would have told me prior to this season starting and seeing what we've seen out of both of these teams, Florida's offense, Texas's defense, I would have told you maybe 3.5, 2.5. Look, we know how tough the Swamp is to go in and try and win football games. So that's, of course, in the Gators' favor, but that's really about it. There just hasn't been much in favor of the Florida Gators this year, outside of that defense that I think has played a lot better than expected, and I liked what they've been able to do. Ron Roberts has had that unit playing at a very high level. However, they have had absolutely zero help. So there's a couple things I want to note for the Gators, not only just from an outlook of this season, but especially going into this game and why it's going to be so tough for them, even having the Swamp behind them in a game like this. Florida is 131st in points per game in the country, nearly the worst. They are 123rd in yards per game in the country, nearly the worst. 125th in yards per play, nearly the worst. And 129th on third down conversion rate. It is terrible. We know how bad this offense has been under Billy Napier. He refuses to give up the play calling. I do not understand why. This offensive line has been terrible. DJ Lagway has regressed. If you've watched my channel, you know I'm regurgitating what we've spoken on really now 3 weeks in a row for the Gators. We took a week off with Florida on the bye week to not have to talk about how poor this offense has been, but yet here we are talking about it again. And look, the reason it's so imminent in this football game is because Texas defensively is legit, and we will get to Texas, but staying with Florida, the offense has to find big plays. I don't see this offense, even with a bye week, squished into this, making enough improvements all across the board to come out and compete and move the ball consistently and methodically down the field against a defense as dominant as the Longhorns. All right, they're going to have to rely on big plays. Florida does get Dallas Wilson this year, star true freshman wide receiver. We'll see what he can do. Him and Vernell Brown have to make plays. Sturdivant has to be a factor. Trey Wilson has to be a factor. And Billy Napier has to set up this offense to get the ball out quick, and get it in their hands. Get your athletes in space. All right. He also has to run the football. Florida has thrown the football 56% of plays. Not what I expected coming into this season, especially considering Billy Napier loves the pro-style offensive approach. I don't really understand it. I know that offensive line has not played well whatsoever, but when you have a back like Jaden Baugh in the backfield, he has to get touches. You have to try and utilize him. Florida's just completely abandoned any kind of establishment in the run game way too fast in a lot of football games. So for one, at least try it. I understand Texas has a very physical, fast defensive line. They're, again, one of the better defenses in the country. So you got to try and see if you can open some gaps, move some holes open. If you can't, then you have to get the ball out quick and get it into your athletes' hands early. There's way too many long developing routes. Florida finds themselves behind the chains. There's trick plays called in at the worst possible times for the Gators that I just don't understand why. So offensively, Florida has to get it going. On the defensive side of the ball, there has been loads of injuries. Dijon Johnson now hurt for the Gators. Cormani McClain has been a bright spot. So I think that secondary matches up fairly well. I'm not too worried about them. Florida has the talent to do this thing on the defensive side of the ball. They've gotten great linebacker play so far this year. The defensive line, although the sack numbers haven't looked great, and although Tyreek Sapp, who I thought would have a breakout year this year, and really didn't need a breakout year, he's been a star. I would have thought he would have had a little bit more of a productive season up to this point, has still been a factor. And really the biggest thing that Florida defense has done well is stop the run. They held LSU, who notably hasn't been a very good rushing offense up to this point anyway, to not a lot of success on the ground. They did a good job in some of their other games on the ground, even against Miami. Now, when you're on the field for 35 minutes in a game and you're losing the time of possession battle by 15 minutes, of course you're going to start to wither down and they're just going to lean on you. But this Florida defensive line has to be able to stand firm, even if they can't get pressure on Arch Manning. Like I said, they really haven't gotten a lot of pressure on the quarterback. The sacks haven't been the story, but they've held firm, right? They've bent, but they have not broken. They've kept this Florida team in essentially every game Florida's played. They've been in it, right? They've looked terrible, but their defense has been the shining star of the unit. So if they're able to at least keep Florida in this game, they're going to have the crowd behind them. That's the big thing. The Swamp's going to be the 12th man for that Florida defense. So I think they will make plays. I think they're going to force turnovers. I think you'll see a fumble in there. I do think Arch throws an interception at some point in this football game, whether it's early or whether it's later and it's crucial. So look, I think they're going to make plays. I think the momentum helps them. Even with injuries in that Miami game, they still made plays when they needed to. So that's not the most worrisome unit for the Gators. It comes down to the offense and Billy Napier's play calling. Enough about the Gators. Let's talk about Texas here. All right. Let's start with the offense. We'll start with Arch Manning. I know that's, of course, going to be the biggest question mark for the Longhorns. And look, I think Arch is going to continue to develop, I should say, for lack of better words there. I think this is a great opportunity for him on the road in the Swamp. It's going to be loud. It's going to be a tough environment. Never an easy place to go win for any quarterback. So I'm curious to see what Sark tries to draw up. I think Wisner and Gibson are both going to be effective out of the backfield. If Texas wants to run the ball, they're going to need to establish that. Again, Florida's starting to get thin defensively. They're losing a lot of bodies. They're probably going to be on the field a lot. You can lean on your defense. So offensively, if you can establish a run game, really chew up clock, keep that defense on the field for as long as possible, and just wear them out. You don't even need explosive plays. However, Wingo, Livingston, Moore, you have threats out wide that can get it done. I just don't think this is a position that Arch has to go out and put a Heisman performance together. It's a good defense. It's a physical defense. Florida's lengthy. They stuff the run pretty well. But yet again, if you can play complementary football, essentially the same way that Ohio State beat Texas, that's all they have to do to win this football game. Truly. They do not need anything spectacular. Do not make mistakes if you're Arch. Don't force anything that's not there. Trust the process, trust the grind, and just get the job done. Okay, let's talk about the Texas defense here, because this is the biggest factor of this football game, without a doubt. We know Florida's offensive struggles. Texas is the number 2 defense in the country in both points per game allowed and yards per game allowed. That should write the story for you. All right. On top of that, they are number 1 in the country in yards per play against a Florida team that is 120th or worst in all 3 of those categories: points per play, points per game, yards per play, and yards per game. So look, stats don't mean everything, but that paints a pretty clear picture of not only what Vegas sees with this line in this game, but also what I think you're going to see in this football game. All right. LaFau, Smith, Taft, some of those guys that lead the team in tackles have to fly around the field, be physical. They will be. I don't worry about them at all. They're not going to see any kind of crazy looks. They're not going to see anything out of the norm. The ball probably won't be out pretty fast. You could sit in a cover 2 shell for most of this game. If you disguise blitzes, I think it's going to throw DJ Lagway's head in a blender. I don't think Billy Napier knows how to adapt to certain things. And truthfully, I think this Texas defense not only is going to be faster and just smarter than Florida, I think that staff on the Texas sideline and up in the press box can really outcoach this Florida team with their eyes closed, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Defense may be a different story, maybe a little chess piece over there from Sark against Ron Roberts' Florida defense, but on this side of the ball, I just don't see anything that's going to stop Texas's defense from continually dominating so far this year. Remember, their loss against Ohio State, they only gave up 14 points. That's the most they've given up all year. Now, I understand outside of Ohio State, the competition hasn't been all that stiff, but still doesn't negate the fact that that's a very good defense. Both Simmons and Burke on the edge are going to be huge in this game. Florida could not block LSU's defensive line. They really couldn't block Ruben Bain and Mesidor against Miami. So, I mean, nothing points to me believing that Florida offensive line is going to be able to stop Texas from not only getting in the backfield, but really just shutting down that run game that Billy Napier's so quick to run away from. So that's it for the preview, you guys. I mean, I think it's, like I said, statistically, a picture is painted here for something that's might not be pretty. I think it's all around. It's a great position for Florida, right? You get your hopes up every time thinking the roster and the talent, the makeup of this team, there's no reason they shouldn't have a chance to come out and win this game. We've seen things from Texas that are a little bit head-scratching. They don't look as dominant as they were last year. They don't look anywhere near the same exact team. But the biggest thing is every time, even just this season and really under the Billy Napier tenure, that I've kind of given myself a glimmer of hope for Florida. Like, hey, you know, they got to wake up for this one, right? They're going to pop. At some point, it's going to click and they're going to pop. And we thought that was the end of last season, right? They beat LSU. They beat Ole Miss. They win their bowl game. They finish the year one of the hottest teams in the country outside of, you know, the eventual national champion Ohio State. But what happened? You know, where did it all go wrong? This year has just completely fallen off the rails for Florida, and this is a pivot game. I just don't see a world in which if Florida loses this thing in the Swamp, no matter how they lose it, whether it's a point or 100, that Billy Napier is still the head coach. I know there might be an athletic director strategy to keep him through the end of the year to try to keep that class together. They do have a decent recruiting class behind him. So I just think the pressure is mounting so much. This is the worst position for Florida. If it were flipped, if Texas was one of the best offenses in the country and one of the lower ranked defenses, I think maybe there's a chance Florida could pull this off. However, again, considering not only statistically, but even just realistically and what we've seen and what we know we're going to get from Billy Napier, I just do not see this offense finding any kind of rhythm or giving themselves a chance to win this football game. So with all of that being said, I have Sark in the Longhorns winning this game. I think they cover 6.5. I think this completely throws Florida's season all the way off the rails. Mind you, they do have A&M the very next week on the road, so that is a brutal stretch for the Gators. I believe it's on the road. I can't remember for certain, but either way you look at it, still not an easy matchup and not an easy schedule for the Gators. And for the Horns, this is a very good game, okay? It's a physical, tough Florida team. It will be a good test to get Arch on the road, but I think you can really lean on your defense and just win a complimentary game. This thing doesn't need to be a shootout. It doesn't need to be fireworks offensively to stick in it or stay around in it. I think your defense will have no problems forcing turnovers, forcing 3-and-outs, keeping you on the field. I think the field position battle, Texas will win. I think a lot of the drives we're going to see out of the Horns will start on their own 40, 35. Good field position for Arch to at least just get in field goal range methodically and slowly kind of build a little bit of a cushion and just eventually start to walk away with this thing as time expires. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Looking forward to this game. I do think Texas wins it. Texas covers. I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you.